Hey guys, I'm a Dimension Jumper and today I'll be reviewing Pokemon FireRed and LeafGreen, which released back in 2004 and then got ported over to the Switch on the 27th of February of this year. Now, this is a remake of the original Pokemon Red and Green, and it's basically just you going through the Kanto region and just trying to become the champion. So basically like every other Pokemon game that we've seen since then and now when it came to the Pokemon games. And yeah, and this is all done in the style of Generation 3, so so Ruby and Sapphire. And yeah, I think this is a fun game. I think when it comes to like when it comes to like basically remaking Red and Green, it's quite nice. I think when you compare the two games side by side, you've got the original, like red, blue, green, yellow, so those games, and I think they are fun, but I think with the added stuff that's been added to FireRed and LeafGreen, because in the original games, in the original first lot of Pokemon games, there was their charm to them, but I think when compared to FireRed and LeafGreen, they aren't as good mainly because of the way that, mainly because it was the first games, and if you compare the first games to now, the first games, personally, I would say that the original games don't hold up as much as compared to like newer games, because there's been more games since then, there's been new types, some new moves, and I think when compare Red to the original Pokemon games to their remakes, I think the remakes are a lot better because you've got some of the additional types, so dark types and steel types, and you've got some additional moves that your Pokemon can learn. So I think the remakes are a lot better when it comes to like just experience, because you are able to like go through all this game, or basically go through all this entire game, and just use moves that you might not have been able to use in the original game, because of the limitations of, or not limitations, but I would say some parts of the game, because some of the moves were useful in some areas, but I think there are a lot of better moves in the remakes. And when it comes to the game as a whole, I do like the way that it's sort of like how it looks, because it's just a really it was an updated version of Kanto for the time before we got like Let's Go Eevee and Pikachu. And yeah, I think FireRed and LeafGreen have some nice moments, and I think it's really cool to seeing like how these old Pokemon get added into like some of the extra types. So for example, with Magneton, it gets the steel types, so Magneton and Magnezone is in Generation 4, but Magnemite and Magnezone, they both get a steel typing, for example, so that's quite cool. And you got like some of the types that might have been added additional types, because some of those types might not have been added since Generation 1. So like, for example, as I said before, Magnemite, Magnezone both got the steel typing because since Generation 2 onwards, the steel types had been a part of the Pokemon series. So yeah, it's cool to see old Pokemon getting additional types. I think that's quite interesting. So yeah, and now it's time for some gameplay. So when it comes to the gameplay for Pokemon FireRed and LeafGreen, it's basically that of, in terms of design, that of Generation 3, so Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. And what I do like about, one of the things I do like about the game is that if I quickly go back to the Pokemon Center very quickly, is that one of the things that's updated for the Gen 1 remakes is that some of the moves have changed. So what I mean by this is that if I go on Meowth quickly, you will notice that Meowth knows Bite. Now in Generation 1, that was basically just a normal type move, because dark types weren't a thing until Generation 2. So now that Generation 2 was a thing by the time that FireRed and LeafGreen were released, So now that means any move that was originally a normal type move now has become a dark type move. So for example, Bite, it was originally a normal type, but now it's become a dark type. So that's really clever and really fun, interesting in terms of like, oh, you've got these old games, all these old mechanics that have been changed to help and be updated the game. So I think that's really cool. I think that's a really cool and interesting way of updating a game, of adding like extra stuff to or new elements to the games. It's kind of like if whenever you play when you play like Generation 6 or X and Y and old Pokemon get the fairy type, that's quite interesting, of like adding interesting things or interesting concepts to Pokemon, stuff like that. So like in Pokemon, you run around in grass and just battle Pokemon. So, and also this was before, in terms of the animations, before Generation 4. So before Diamond, Pearl and Platinum, you didn't have like the Pokemon doing like one bit of animation, and I think that was interesting. I think it gave the whole Pokemon a whole lot of personality, but just because whatever Pokemon you had on your team and you used, it would just do that one bit of animation, and that was cool. But with this, the Pokemon is just bobbing up and down, and that's okay. I think it would have been a whole lot better. I think it's mainly just because of the limitations of I think it was the Game Boy Advance that FireRed and LeafGreen released, but that's okay, I don't really mind. But yeah, so like with any other Pokemon game, you've got 4 different moves, and basically just use a particular move until you can either capture Pokemon or you defeat the Pokemon, and you defeat the Pokemon, you'll get that experience. And also, whenever your Pokemon learns or gets to a particular level, they can learn a move. So, Thrash, I might get rid of Focus Energy. That. And also, I want to quickly show you another thing that was added onto the the Gen 1 remakes, and that is that here we go. That every Pokemon now has a ability, which is quite cool. So again, I think that's another thing that's added from Generation 3, because Generation 3, I believe, is the generation that added abilities to the series. So again, now Pokemon have abilities that I think help the game a whole lot better, because if you play Generation 1, they were fun, but I think you can tell that we've come so far since those games, because we've had, abilities, we've had new Pokemon, we've had new types, and I think the original Generation 1 games do have their charm, but you can tell that they aren't, I believe, in my opinion, they aren't as impressive as they are now. We've got like 9 generations of games released and a Generation 10 on its way. So I can see the people who are being nostalgic for the first generation of Pokemon games, but if you compare Red and Blue and Green even to Scarlet and Violet, you can tell that there's been a huge amount of improvements between those games, and I think adding new stuff to the remakes, it's a really cool way of just helping those games a whole lot and just giving them a new coat of paint. So yeah, as a whole, I do like the remakes. I think they're really fun, and I think they're a good way of experiencing the games as a whole. And yeah, I think that's really fun. So that's been it for the gameplay. Now I'm going to go back to the review. So as a whole, I think Pokemon FireRed and LeafGreen are fun games. I think they're good remakes when they have been released, and I think it's because I've played it since it was released. I think it's quite fun, and I think it's nice to see how this game is added, well, not added on, but like how it's how the generation that has been remade in helps with the game as a whole. Because with the original games, you had like some Pokemon that were like well types that weren't as balanced as other ones. So, for example, with the Psychic type, for example, that was like the most powerful, strongest type in the game in when it comes to the original Pokemon game. So, for when it comes to Generation 1, because there was really nothing to stop it, because it was super effective against poison types, and ghost type and bug type moves weren't really. There were some bug and ghost type moves, but they didn't really do too much against psychic types. So if you had a psychic type in the original generation of Pokemon, you could just pretty much sweep a whole lot of the game. And yeah, but with FireRed and LeafGreen, that's now balanced a whole lot, because you've got dark types and you've got steel types. So psychic types aren't as powerful as they once were in the first generation. And I do like how it's like got the whole Generation 3 like colors and stuff like that. So when it comes to like the graphics and how you battle with your Pokemon, that sort of thing. And there's also the whole thing that that was circling around when this game had been announced to be a port onto the Switch, and that's because you could pay for either version, and it wasn't on the Game Boy Advance. And I think I can kind of see where people are coming from, because on the one hand, it'll be better because people are already paying for the Nintendo online library stuff. I think it would be a whole lot better for FireRed and LeafGreen to be on that system. But then there's also like, it's Pokemon. It's going to make money even if doesn't get released onto the thing. So it's kind of like, I think some people might. There's basically two arguments. There's like, should it be released separately, or should it be part of the online system which people are already paying for? So it's kind of brings up that question depending on who you ask. So yeah, but as a whole, it's a very fun remake. I think it's a very cool way of going back to Kanto at the time, and also bringing in new players that might have only played games like Sword and Shield, Scarlet and Violet, the Legends games, that sort of thing. So yeah, I think as a whole, Pokemon FireRed and LeafGreen are very fun games. So yeah. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.